Syria's transitional government held the country's first parliamentary election since the fall of former President Bashar al-Assad. The indirect vote is considered a key step in the country's transitional period. CGTN's Haida Kazwini has more in this report.
Around 6,000 members of the Electoral College voted to select 140 parliamentarians in the indirect elections held across 50 districts nationwide. Sunday's vote determined two-thirds of the 210-seat parliament, while the remaining third will be appointed later by the interim leader, Ahmed al-Shara, completing the formal establishment of the legislature.
The basic mission for us is to rebuild our country and rebuild its institutions and houses. We are going through one of the biggest humanitarian, economic and social crises in this region. So our program must focus on rebuilding and rehabilitation.
The absence of popular vote has drawn criticism, with many calling the process exclusive. However, interim authorities explained that this system was necessary due to the lack of reliable population data and the displacement of millions of Syrians caused by the war.
The indirect voting system does not represent the entire spectrum of Syrian society, but it satisfies an acceptable portion of the Syrian people. Regulations are usually formed in accordance with the needs of the people. We restored to this system because we can't go for direct votes with the absence of a civil registry. And also many people are still missing, displaced, or living in makeshift shelters.
The elections in 3 provinces in southern and northeast Syria were indefinitely postponed due to tension between the locals in those provinces and the interim authorities. This exclusion has also sparked concerns about the level of representation in the newly formed parliament.
The Syrian government is trying to satisfy the international community, which is demanding a transitional period. But the transitional period needs different conditions to be implemented. The government is holding parliamentary elections, but due to the lack of a social contract, this process will make the Syrian issue even more complicated.
The Syrian parliamentary elections come at a crucial time for the Syrian interim government as it pursues a legitimacy in the wake of clashes and tensions with the Syrian ethnic and religious minorities. And also as the humanitarian and financial needs are growing as thousands of Syrians return home. Haida Kazwini, CGTN, Damascus.
There is much to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Bassam Barabandi worked in the diplomatic service of the Assad-led Syrian government for 14 years before leaving the embassy in Washington, D.C. in the summer of 2013. He would co-found People Demand Change. Wang heads the Center for International Strategic Studies at China's Northwest University. Also with us is Theodore Kattouf. He served as the United States ambassador to Syria and the United Arab Emirates. And Edmund Ghareeb is an academic and Middle East analyst. He's right here with us in the studio. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Edmund, let's start here in the studio. This is seen as a landmark post-war election in Syria. The results show that most, or the majority of those elected, there was an indirect election, I should say. The people didn't vote. There was just a small group that voted. But the majority of those elected are male and Sunni Muslim. Only 4% of women and only 2 Christians were voted in. What's your assessment of this outcome?
Well, clearly this is a step, at least. The new government wants to move ahead with the elections to have representative government. But the way it was done raises a lot of questions. I mean, as you pointed out, first of all, it is only a small number of people who participated in the election. That doesn't, that you cannot say that this is going to be representative of the Syrian people. At the same time, also, there were areas, certain areas, 3 provinces that did not participate. In addition to that, as we said, the number of women, very tiny, a small number, probably 4 women out of the whole group. And then later on, probably there are going to be 70 more who are going to be selected probably by the leadership. And that means what is likely to happen is perhaps they might try to get people from different backgrounds, ethnic, religious, to make at least some balance. And if they do that, that at least would be a step forward. Nevertheless, they are going to be selected by the leaders themselves. And this is supposed to be a parliament representing the people. So basically, to what extent are we seeing the people participate?
All right, let me go to Ambassador Kattouf. Ambassador, good to have you with us. Firstly, what are your thoughts on the outcome of this election? And as Edmund Ghareeb pointed out a moment ago, I mean, there were concerns that this was not a directly elected parliament, it was indirect, and the fact that minorities were not well represented. But as we heard in our report as well, there was concerns over security in the country. There's no civil registry. So do you think it was a good first step?
I do. Giving this government, this leader, Ahmed Shara, for now the benefit of the doubt. Sure, this could just be him checking the box to try to keep potential donor companies happy, to try to keep the situation in Syria calm. But after all, this is a country that was through 13 years of a brutal civil war. You know, half the people either made refugees or internally displaced. The country is not yet unified, if ever. You have a large northeastern section controlled by the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are largely just the Kurdish people in that area. You have Israel interfering in the south, trying to self-declaring itself as the protectors of the Druze population in Suwaida and nearby areas, telling the Syrians that the areas southwest of Damascus are largely a no-go area for its forces. You have minorities quite uneasy. So like Edmund said, I would expect President Shara to select many more women, many more from minorities. And sure, they're not going to be people who oppose Shara, let's be honest. But it's a necessary first step. And you have to start somewhere. So for now, we'll take it and watch very, very carefully what goes on from here.
So, Ambassador, given all those concerns that you've outlined there and raised, do you think there will be question marks over the legitimacy of the process, or indeed of the body that was elected?
There, you know, if we look at the, I don't want to single out any government or regime, but the Middle East is not filled with democracies, as we know. And, you know, there's different degrees of authoritarianism. Syria deserves better than that. I hope it gets it. But leaders have to first survive if they want to carry out their programs. And I know I can't think of many leaders in the region who are more vulnerable right now than Ahmed Shara. The man is, you know, he's showing a lot of courage. Physical courage and even moral courage, but you know, he came in as part of a Islamist movement. Let's be honest, and he cannot just jettison all these people who got him here and say, "Well, now we're going to forget about you."
Bassam Barabandi, great to have you with us. A popular vote is planned after this new parliament completes a 30-month term. And as I said earlier on, you left your position with the Assad government 12 years ago and founded People Demand Change. Well, change has happened in Syria. Assad is gone. And Ahmed al-Shara is now the president. He was the leader of al-Qaeda, which is considered a terrorist group by many countries, including the United States. He's now leading the government. What do you make of these changes?
Thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be with you as Ambassador Kattouf and Edmund. Look, the changes, it will happen. We know that Assad cannot survive. He make all the mistakes in the books, and we are looking for the future. I know the election wasn't that ideal. Everybody, we as a Syrian, our expectation really high. As Mr. Kattouf said, we deserve better future, more stable Syria. The situation on the ground is completely different. The challenges is big. Having the elections with Shara, the way you describe it, the way he came from, the ideological of Islamic group, they refuse the democracy by nature. They refuse the elections. The concept of elections doesn't exist. So to have it from that angle, to say this group who came from that terrorist background accept to have this kind of elections, it's good sign toward the people. It's not enough for us. You see the balance. This is where we are. I think our expectation much higher. The Syria deserves much better future and so on and so forth. But for them to accept the concept itself of elections, that's big. Usually all the Islamist group, Salafist group, they reject that things because that means the human will make the laws, not the devil. Right. So that big challenge, that really big challenge movement. Now again, as the future, we don't know about the future. I think all the Syrians are really happy that Assad has gone. We have more energy to rebuild Syria, and people really want to involve in developing Syria, make Syria more stable. Yeah. But yet, everybody, as Mr. Edmund said, the challenges on the ground is huge. It's really huge.
Okay, let's go to Beijing to Wang Jin. Wang Jin, welcome to the show. Now, China has a close relationship with Syria. In fact, Syria is a member of the Belt and Road Initiative. How will Beijing be viewing these latest developments?
Well, I think the vote is very crucial for the stability of Syria because we know that there were always doubts of two dimensions over the new government or the new regime led by Bashar. On the one hand, many maintain that Bashar comes out of a kind of the so-called extremist groups, so-called terrorist groups, and so how the country that led by him could be. And also on the other hand, there were still a lot of divisions inside Syria, and also in the northeastern part, in the southern part, especially in the Suvida area, and also that intervened by Turkey, intervened by Israel, intervened by other countries. These are all the topics. So for China, we believe that it is a very crucial moment for Syria because it's actually through the election that the Syrian new government could enhance their legitimacy at home as well as externally, internationally. So for China, stability for the partners is the most important priority because we know that if any kind of the cooperation projects could be mentioned and could be successfully implemented, the very precondition is the stability of the certain country. So that's why I think for China, we hope that the election could be successful, and also we hope that the election that is held by inside Syria right now could be the very, very important opportunity for the new beginning for the bilateral relations between China and Syria.
Edmund, listening there to our fellow panelists telling us that the challenges are big, the future is daunting. There are something like 16.5 million Syrians who are in need of aid, in need of help. It's been called one of the biggest humanitarian crises in the world. Here is the UN Special Envoy, Geir Pedersen. Let's listen to what he has to say about it.
Syria urgently requires international material assistance on a scale commensurate with its needs and ambition. We need to see the private sector's footprint back in Syria, including through nurturing Syria's domestic private sector to ensure that what exists survives and thrives. To achieve this will require more support from the region and the wider international community, and sustained sanctions and export control relief, reassurances to banks and companies, and an accelerated path of domestic reforms. It also, of course, requires political stability.
So, as we heard there, Edmund, the challenges are big. The country's GDP, in fact, has declined 80% since 2010. How big is this challenge in rebuilding and recovery?
It's a huge challenge. There is no doubt that Syria has faced and is facing a very difficult situation. Economically, politically, Syria has become an arena for the interventions also by some of its neighbors. And they are still facing problems with the sanctions, including sanctions some of the sanctions by the United States. The U.S. has lifted some of the sanctions, but there are still some that only Congress can remove. And this is going to be very difficult for Syria. There are some positive things, but this will depend on the ability of the new government to become a government that's not representative of a certain group or a certain sect.
Yes.
They have to include, to be very inclusive. What we have heard so far from President Bashar has been very positive. He says that he's going to be inclusive, he's going to bring different groups of Syria into his own government, and he's going to represent all of them. But the reality, however, might be a little bit different. And this is where the challenge that's going to be facing him and facing his government and facing Syria. In addition to all of that, what we are seeing now is that there are forces that feel that they are not representative, and there's a question of, again, of going back almost to the Sykes-Picot agreement, where you separate, the country was going to be divided along sectarian and ethnic lines. We see, for example, the question of Kurdish question now. What we have seen recently, for example, there was one of the representatives of the Kurdish National Council appealed to the government to allow Nowruz, which is a religious, ancient, let's call it, holiday.
Yeah.
And however, they refused that, they rejected that. And they transformed it, they made it Mother's Day. Now, what would have been the problem? You say that you want to bring to Syria and to the Syrian people dignity and freedom. Well, where is the dignity and freedom? And
just very quickly, Edmund, I mean, there probably are countries in the region who might not want a strong, stable, independent Syria.
Absolutely. That's, I think, one of the real dangers. And Syria is in a sense, they are paying the price for this. We see countries such as Turkey on the one hand, Israel on the other, plus other countries are involved. Superpowers now are also involved. We're seeing efforts, for example, Syria is trying to rebuild. And it's very important to do that. But to do that, they really have to be inclusive, and they have to also punish those who commit crime. I think that is something that's essential.
Okay, I want to get Ambassador Kattouf's views on that, on this being an inclusive government. Ambassador, as Edmund Ghareeb points out, one of the big challenges will be to see a government emerge that is not one that just represents one group or one ethnicity. But, you know, the election organizers had hoped that there'd be a 20% representation of women, for instance. They would, they would have a say in the formulation of public policy. But as we see, few women were elected. This is something that the president recognizes. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We have made it clear that we will never accept the division of Syria in factions, because this would lead to trouble and risk against neighboring countries such as Iraq. Therefore, we have to reach peaceful solutions. We have to endorse the document related to the implementation of the convention or the agreement of all the factions, including those supported by Turkey and those supported by Iran. We have to seize the opportunity in order to reorganize Syria, because this will benefit everybody, all factions, including the Kurds.
So there we heard it, Ambassador. President al-Shara wants to reach peaceful solutions, as he puts it. He wants to reorganize Syria. He put that as well. How does he do it?
If I knew, I suspect Dr. Bashar would want to speak with me, but I don't. Listen, this is a tightrope balancing act that is phenomenally difficult. I like what Shara has said, obviously, and he has to say those things because of the donor community and even minorities within his own country, and even many Sunnis would want to have done with him if they thought he was trying to establish a narrow Islamist sectarian state. We say that Syria has has different ethnic and religious groups, and that's certainly true. But by my count, about 70% of the country is Sunni Arab. but by no means is a majority of that Sunni Arab population wanting an Islamist state. The Syrians historically are mercantile people, they're traders, they're business people, there's craftsmen and the like, and they like doing business and they like openness, and there's always been the ability to deal with one another across sectarian lines in commerce and the like. But at the same time, Shara, the man wants to, like all Arab leaders, he wants to, like all leaders, period. He wants to survive, not just physically, but literally survive. And he's walking through a minefield because the people who got him to where he is, at least the fighters, came out of very radical groups. But the people he seeks to rule are not looking for sectarianism and violence and radicalism. They want peace, they want prosperity, obviously, and they want to be able to live a life of dignity.
Bassam Barabandi, this is a country, of course, that's emerging from a civil war that has taken so many lives and destroyed so much of the country. The United Nations reports that there is the presence of landmines and other explosives. It continues to pose a major and deadly threat, of course. There have been 600 casualties since December, and 1.2 million people have returned to the country since December as well. The United Nations predicts that 3.5 million people will return to the country by the end of this year. And of course, there are still hostilities which continue in the north of the country. So how do you see these obstacles being overcome? It's going to take an effort from all sides, isn't it?
Look, I will continue what Ambassador Kattouf was saying. So the international community, regional countries, they try to make really balance between keep Syria stabilized and keep Syria represent all Syrian. So there's kind of balance between how much we should support Al-Shara to keep Syria balanced, to keep Syria stable, to bring these refugees back home with all the infrastructure needed. At the same time, they don't want to see Syria like light Islamic country like Taliban. They need Syria to be just normal countries. So I think since Syria is really weak, it need all this international support, donor support in all aspects of life. I think the international community can play a role to make Syria a successful story.
Right.
If this is the balance between what's going on right now. I think the 3 million numbers, I think, is too much exaggerated. 60% of Syrian infrastructure has been destroyed. 90% of Syrians are under poverty lines. Till today, there's no direct investment money came to Syria. There's no infrastructure. There's no schooling. Most of the people that we know about who came to Syria, either they are under poverty line in Turkey or Jordan or Lebanon.
Right.
So Syria is a better place for them financially, or they are elders. Whereas the people or the family that they have school kids, they go to school, they prefer to stay in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Germany, and Egypt or Turkey. Yet we don't have the infrastructure to absorb at least the schooling wise. I'm not talking about the health sector or the property sector or any other. The challenges is big. But I think Shara have golden opportunity today to make Syria stable, to absorb all the investment money. Most importantly, to get Syrian together. Till today, Syrian not together. Based on, what Ambassador and Mr. Professor Kattouf said that Professor Edmund said, literally Syria is still divided. People they don't trust each other. They don't talk to each other. We hoped before that the conference of dialogue among Syria will narrow the gaps. It didn't happen. This legislation council, we hope that will be able to narrow the gaps. If Syrian people don't get together, no matter how much you put money, it will not be stable.
Okay. Wang Jin, on this question of trust and these groups beginning to talk to each other as well, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said that the new government must oppose all forms of extremism, all forms of terrorism, and that call was repeated actually by the Chinese permanent representative at the United Nations. as well. What is your assessment? What does Syria have to do to ensure public safety?
Well, I think the Chinese rhetoric or the Chinese, actually the words represent the international shared view over Syria's future, because and also I think this represents the benefits of Syrian people themselves, because when a country is still harboring several kinds of so-called terrorism, or still harboring the ideas and upholding the ideas of terrorism, and still maybe protecting the terrorists, particularly the foreign terrorists, it would be very difficult to earn the trust from other countries. Because we know that inside Syria, there were terrorists from many countries, from Central Asia, maybe from the West Asia, and also from other parts of the world. And these would be the very challenging task for Syria to how to settle them, and how to include it into the new forms of government, and how to prevent them from being the new place for the expanding of the terrorism, both in this region as well as internationally. So that's why I think China's voice represents the concerns of the international community. And also, on the other hand, we cannot forget that Syria now is facing a very important historic moment, that they want to transfer from the very turmoil country and to the very stable government, a stable country. So that's why the terrorism could not be tolerated in this country and in any places in this country. So that's why I think China's rhetoric and the words are very just. Very, very important, not only for the Syrian people themselves, but also I think for the international community, who has close relations and close concerns over what is happening inside Syria.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.